In this video, we'll start building the app that I told you about. So let's first say it's a notes app, and in a note you have a title, a description, and an image. You can of course delete a note. You can change the order. Now they are ordered by the date they were added in. If we click on this one, now they are ordered by the title. So we can just change the order by clicking on this one. Here we get the number of notes that we have. We can of course delete a note by just clicking on this X icon. As you can see, the note is gone. Now we have 4 notes. We can add a new note. Right here we can add a new note, so just call it new description, new disk, for example, and then we can save it, or we can add an image first. So we click on this box in here. We get a dialog in which we can search for an image like new, for example. As you can see here, we get a bunch of images. Let's select one of them like this one, and let's close the keyboard. As you can see, the image changes in real time. We choose this one, we just close the dialog, the image is there, we click on save, and here is our note. That is saved because now we are ordering by the date they were added in. It is the last one, but if we order by the title, it would not be the last one. So that's the app. Right now we don't have edit notes, so we can't click on a note and then edit it. That will be your homework. So after building this app, would you see how to actually build such an app, test all those components, test database, test navigation, test everything. You will actually be able to create this edit note screen, whatever you want to call it, in which you just edit a note, okay, and test it by yourself, because of course that's how you would learn testing. Now I'm going to show you the base, where to start from, and then you continue by yourself, because that's how you actually learn, by continuing with yourself. Okay, let's get started. In this first video, we will do a bunch of things which are setting our Room database from the database itself, the DAO and the entity, and then we'll do some dependency injection, and also we'll test our DAO. So this DAO that gets notes from the database, upserting a note, deleting a note, and all those stuff, we'll test that. We'll write test cases for it, and also we'll create the mappers. So how do we map an entity that we get from the Room database to a model that we want to use in our app? So all of that in this first video. So let's go now to Underwood Studio. Let's make this smaller like this, and let's get started. So now we'll start implementing our Room database. So let's go right here, and then let's create a new package called Core, in which we'll have all of those packages. And then in Core we'll have, first of all, presentation. Let's put this main activity and UI inside the presentation of Core, because of course in this Core we'll have all those classes, functions, and things that are shared between different features in our app. Okay, and then we'll create a new package called data.local, in which we'll have all our local stuff. Now we want actually this data to be inside Core because it's not inside it. So let's open data. Now inside local, we'll create our entity, and let me just paste it so we can save time, because this playlist is about testing, not exactly what Room database is. If you don't understand database, dependency injection, retrofit, and all those stuff, I have videos about all those things. You can go back and watch them before you continue this playlist, because we will actually heavily use those concepts in this playlist. And if you don't know them, then you may be confused while watching this testing playlist. Okay. Here is my note entity. We want to annotate with the entity. Actually, the dependencies, I did not add them. So let's go right here, and I don't have any dependencies. So let me add them. Okay, so I did add them. What we need here is the Dagger Hilt plugin, Kotlin serialization for navigation. The new navigation in Kotlin or in Jetpack Compose requires this one. Capped for Dagger Hilt. I'm using these 2 lines to avoid errors, because without them the app doesn't actually build, or Gradle, we get a Gradle error. We need those 2 lines. We have navigation libraries, Room database, coroutines, a lifecycle view model, and then Dagger Hilt. So yeah, that's all we need. Retrofit, query to load images, extended icons for more icons, local tests, all the libraries that we need for local tests, and then instrumented tests, or tests that need to access the Underwood resources, all of them. And then in libs.version, again, we added those plugins, as you can see, and all those versions, all those libraries with their versions. Also in build.gradle right here, I added those 2. That's all you need. I will leave this app in the description. Of course, you can copy it from there. You can copy these libraries from there. Now we can create our entity. So now entity is imported, primary key. So this is now the entity. The primary key is auto-generated. We won't generate it. And we have in our entity the title, the description, the image URL that it shows as we saw, and then the date it were added in. So if you want to order the items by the date they were added in, this is what we use. If you want to order them by the title, this is what we use. Okay, let's now create the DAO. Let me just copy it and paste it. And I'm actually doing this copy pasting for these things because, as I said, we don't focus on our database to just save time. So our DAO, we annotate it with DAO, the first function to assert a node entity, we pass a node entity. The second function to get all node entities that we have, we select from our node entity table, and it returns a list of node entities. And then the last one, deleting, to delete a node entity, we pass a node entity that we want to delete. And then we want to create our database. So let me just copy that as well. And here it is, our database. The entity is this one, the version is this one, and it extends Room database. This is the DAO, the node DAO. Okay, now what you want to do is doing some dependency injections. So you just close this, close data, and then inside core, we will have another package called DI, in which we'll have our app module like this. That is going to be an object. So objects all the way at the bottom there. We want to annotate this with a module, and then install in singleton component class. Let's import that. Let's create some space. Okay. Inside it, we want to provide our room database. So a function that provides, and then singleton, so fun provide node DB. It takes application because we need application for that. So application of type application. It returns our node DB, and then return room dot database builder. We need to pass now our application and then our node table like this, and then the table name can be just node db dot db, and then dot build. Okay, so now we provide our database. The next thing we want to do is creating the model that we want to use in our app. So inside core again, we'll create another package called a domain. So inside domain, actually I should have created a package called model, and then we want to have our node item or node model, whatever we want to call it. So node item, that's going to be a data class, and we just paste it. As you can see, the same as my entity, title, description, image URL, date added, and the ID default 0. That's it. Now I need to create a mapper, or probably a bunch of mappers, to map this entity to my model. So inside data, create a new package called mapper, and then node mappers, that's what I'm going to call them. It's going to be a file. We actually have 3 different mappers, and I'm going to again paste them and we'll see them. So here we have node item, let's import that. Node entity, let's import that as well. So we have node item to node entity for insertion. Why? Because when we want to insert a node to a database, to our database, we don't want to create an ID. We want the ID to be auto-generated. So we don't pass the ID. We leave the ID as it is because Room database is going to auto-generate that ID for us. So we don't pass the ID. But then when we want to delete, we again want to convert a node item to a node entity like this. But then we want the ID. So then the ID that we have in our node item, we want to map it to the one in our node entity because we want to send that node entity to our DAO to delete the node from the database. So here we need the ID, but here we didn't need it. So that's why I have 2 versions of these. And if I actually pass the ID in here, that means it won't be auto-generated and the ID will be just what I passed in here. So that wouldn't be convenient. I want an auto-generated ID by the database. That's actually why we use Room. So the last one is node entity to node item. So we just convert what we get from our database to our node item that we want to use. Here we assign the ID, since that's nullable, 0 as a default value, but the ID will always be there even though it's nullable. And yeah, so that's how we convert these. Now the next thing we want to do is testing. What are we going to test? Our node DAO. We want to test if we actually do insert nodes to our Room database, if we do get those nodes, if we do delete a node. So now to generate the test for this one, we want to go to underwood. Since this is where we want it to be, we can delete this pre-existing test, and then we want to create the same package structure because with DAOs we can't actually just generate a test. We don't have that. It's not like a repository or so we want to create the same package structure that is, we can actually look at it core.data.local, so core.data.local like this. And now we'll create our test right here. But before creating the test, we want to create a test application, you could say. So we want to go right here into our root package, because maybe I don't have an application already. So let's actually create that first in here, app, that is going to extend application and Hilt under with app. And then we want to register that application in our manifest. So name app. We also may need the internet permission for Retrofit, so let's add that. So this is our main app application, but we want to create a testing one. So we will go to our root package and then we'll create a new class called Hilt. Since we use Dagger Hilt test runner, so this is required. Actually, I have an extra n in there. This is going to extend under with gunit runner, and then we have one function to override, which is a new application. Let's bring this to a new line, and then let's just create some space. As you can see right here, I'm passing this class name. Now I want to change this with Hilt test application double common class.java. So just bring this to a new line, dot name, because we want the string. As you can see now, I'm creating this Hilt test application for testing, which is, as I said, needed. Now I want to go here to our build.gradle, of course, the module app build.gradle. And then as you can see, we have this under with gunit runner, but then we want to actually replace it with the new one that we created, which is this Hilt test runner. So we want to copy our package name, in which, of course, the package in which that class exists, dot, and then the class name. So make sure that it's the same, because otherwise it won't work like this. So now we have it. We can start writing our underwood tests. Inside here, we'll create a new class called node.DAO_test. We want to annotate this with Hilt underwood test. And now we want to test our DAO, and our DAO accesses our database, but we don't want to access our real database in our test. That's not something we want to do. We want to create, let's say, a fake database. So how do we do that? As you can see right here, we already provided our database. What we are going to do is, in our test again, in core, we'll create another package, or let's just copy it. So it will be the same di, and then we'll have this app module. But since this one now is for testing, we want to call it test app module like this. And then we want to actually provide a database that can be in our device. But in fact, we're going to provide an in-memory database builder. So as the name says, this one doesn't need a name. It's a database in the memory. So the database is created, we insert items to it, we delete them, whatever we do. Once we close the app, the database is gone. There is no more such a database anymore. It's just in the memory. So it's not a consistent, or it's persistently in our device. Unlike this real database that we have in here, this one is in an in-memory database that is just like an object that we have in our app, and then once the app is closed, the object is gone. That's how it is, but it actually acts the same as a real Room database that we can use for testing. Okay, so that's what we are going to use. So what we do right now is, here we provided our real Room database, and now here we provided an in-memory Room database that we want to use in our test. Now we have two modules that provide the same dependency, which is our database, and we want to use the test one. Since we want to use the test one, we want now to uninstall a module. So we'll write uninstall modules, passing my app module double common class. So I'm going now to uninstall my real app module, in which I have my real database, and I will instead use this one, which is in which I have this fake in-memory database, because otherwise I will have two different modules providing the same dependency and the app won't even compile. I will get an error that I provide the same dependency twice. In this case, I'm actually uninstalling this module, so I only use this one. Okay, now let's write the test for our DAO. Let's create some space down here. And now, since we want to inject dependencies to our test, to our node.DAO test, we want to use a rule. So what this rule is, just a Dagger Hilt rule that makes us able to inject those dependencies. So to create it, we want to annotate get rule, import rule like this, and then var Hilt rule. This is it, Hilt and with rule, passing this as my test instance. And again, let's just think about this test. What type of test is this that we are writing? So this test is going to only test functions. So these are unit tests, but instrumented unit tests because they need the with framework stuff. Since these are small tests or unit tests, then we need to annotate it with small test. This is not important or required, but it's recommended, okay, because this is a unit test, so annotate it with that. And then the second thing is, in our room database we have quite some suspend function that, let's check our DAO. What is it? As you can see, these are all suspend functions that will block our thread when they execute. And to make sure that these tasks are executed independently with coroutines, we want to create another rule, get rule var instance, actually it's exactly this one, instance task executor rule, like this. So instance task executor rule, this is the rule that we use to execute our asynchronous tasks independently in our main thread. And then we need this before function, so it's already actually suggesting it for me. So before fun setup, and then in the setup we need this Hilt rule dot inject to be able to inject all our dependencies in the setup or before our test run. And what we need here is our DAO instance, because that's exactly how we are going to get all those functions that we can test. So to get that DAO, we need our database. So we're going to write inject, and of course we already provided our database. We want now to inject it, and that's going to be a late init var node db is going to be a node db, and then our DAO private late init var DAO of type node DAO, not database but node DAO. Why am I not making this one private? Because we won't be able to inject to private fields. We need it to be public like that, or not private. Now we want to initiate our DAO, so DAO is going to be my node DAO, my node db.node DAO. Now I have my DAO and I can start writing my tests. But again, actually before writing the tests, we want to close our database after we finish with it. So we want to create the after function that I already told you about. When our test is finished, this teardown function will be called because it's annotated with after, and then we want to close any database, release any resources that we want when the test is finished. In this case, we want to close our database. Now let's just start writing the test. Actually, we have to set up these things for every test that we run. We can just copy them and paste them in the test, but this, providing the application or the app module, test app module, this Hilt test runner, we only need to set up these once in our app, but these things actually with every test, okay? Now let's write our test, our first test, which is for getting nodes from our database. That's going to be annotated with @test like this, and then fun get all nodes from empty DB, for example. So our database at first is empty. We want to get the nodes from it, and here it should return an empty list. Node list is empty, like that. And then we want to assert that. So assert that, let's just import it from truth. What do you want to assert? Our DAO dot get all node entities dot is empty. And since this is a blocking or a suspend function that blocks our thread, we want to execute it in a coroutine. To do that, we're going to write is equal to run test. Here we get a coroutine scope in which now we can verify that when our database is empty, we do get an empty list. So nothing is there at first. So we can run our test, and this test will definitely require the emulator to run because it's an instrumented test. Let's wait for it. But now we get an error that says uninstall module should only be used in test classes annotated with Hilt and with test. I'm not sure if I have not actually annotated it with that Hilt and with app. Okay, so that's Hilt and with test. I'm sorry. So let's just now rerun our test. Hopefully now we have no errors. Our test actually fails, and let's see what the problem is. It says Hilt and with app application. I have a problem with application. I'm not sure why. So let me see. So here I have Hilt and with app, and then this application new okay, so this one is supposed to be new application actually, and now it's all messed up. So let me just go back and re-override it. New application. And this is what I need to pass to it in the argument right there, and we can get rid of this. So now we use new application, not new activity. That was a mistake. Now let's rerun the test that again will require the emulator to run. Let's wait for it. Hopefully we do get an empty list from our empty database, and we do. Our DAO works just fine. Now let's run, or let's write the rest of the test. The next test is actually to ensure that we get items from a database that does have items. So just copy this. Now get all nodes from DB. Node list is not empty now. So let's say we do have items in there, and to have items we need to insert them. So just delete this. We'll keep that because we need it for later, and we'll create a for loop. So for I in the range not exactly 10, let's just go for 4, something small, and then we want to create a val node entity is equal to node entity. Let's just fill these. We have a description actually and date added. We also need image URL. It's going to be image I, okay? And then the ID, we can either actually create our ID or just leave it auto-generated. Then what we want to do is insert it with our DAO. So DAO dot upsert node item and my node item. So what I do is upserting 4 items to my database. Okay, now let's make sure that list is not empty. So assert that my entities list is not empty. So let's run this test because now we already inserted some items into it. And the test passes, so when I insert items, I do get them back. Now, the next test is going to be inserting an item and ensuring that it's inserted. So it will be upsert node, and then what we expect right here is going to be node is upserted. So it is in the database, okay? So we'll create a node item like this. The ID, let's say 1, whatever title, whatever content or description, image, date added, and then DAO dot upsert node item passing my node entity, and then I want to get my entities dot contains my node entity. So I'll make sure that this one now is actually true. It is contained in the list. So let's run the test, and it does actually pass, so the node is inserted to the database. Now the last test we're going to write is for deleting a node. So delete node, node is deleted, as that's what we expect from this test. Okay, so now we create a node. We want to upsert that node. We want to ensure that it's in the database, and then we want to delete it. So DAO.delete node entity, and then we want to ensure that it's no longer there. So this is now false. And now this result won't be used. We want to say is actually true. So that's true or not. And this one could be dot is true as well. So if it's not contained in there, let's run the test. The test passes. Now all I'm going to do is run all these tests in my node DAO test. So I want to see all of them with a green check mark so that I feel good. As you can see, all my tests pass. The DAO is working just fine. And this is it for this video. So see you in the next video in this playlist, and bye.